I wake up before the alarm, already alert in a way that doesn't feel earned. The ceiling above me is unfamiliar, too high, too clean, too certain. For a few seconds, I try to locate myself by habit, age, job, unfinished problems. Then the weight arrives, not as emotion, but as fact. For this single day, I am the President of France. Not a metaphor, not an idea. The role that has belonged to Emmanuel Macron since 2017, renewed in 2022. The figure who broke the old left-right order and replaced it with something technocratic, reformist, and endlessly contested. The one associated with labor market reforms, tax cuts for business, competitiveness, globalization. The one whose name triggers applause in boardrooms and anger in the streets. The one tied to yellow vests, pension protests, cost of living resentment, and the constant accusation of governing from above. I haven't moved yet, but the room is already behaving differently. Somewhere beyond the walls, schedules are rearranging themselves. Security is awake. Advisors are alert. Doors I don't even know exist are unlocked in advance. Not because of anything I intend to do, but because of the title now attached to my body. That realization lands wrong. Authority usually arrives after years of preparation, ambition, or at least consent. This arrives like luggage placed in my hands by mistake, too heavy to refuse. I have Macron's access without his training, his long immersion in institutions, his tolerance for conflict. The influence is total, the internal readiness is absent. A knock comes, precise, respectful, inevitable. Someone asks if I'm awake. The phrasing matters. It assumes I am. It assumes compliance will follow. I answer automatically, and the word yes seems to activate a chain of permissions I didn't approve. I catch my reflection while getting dressed. The face looks calm enough. The role fits visually. That's the disturbing part. Power doesn't announce itself with horns or music. It slides in quietly and lets others perform the awe on its behalf. I think about the contradictions tied to this office. Economic liberalization paired with social unrest, strategic European ambition paired with domestic fragmentation, decisive reform pursued through constant political confrontation. All of that sits on me now, compressed into a single day. I feel the pressure to act, but also the temptation to test how fragile the rituals really are. The discomfort grows as people defer before I've earned their trust. Instructions are followed before I've spoken clearly. Rules soften in anticipation, not response. I'm being treated as decisive while still orienting myself, as legitimate while internally unaligned. This is not exhilaration. It's vertigo without movement. The unsettling awareness that authority functions independently of understanding, and that tradition, so loudly defended, might depend less on belief than on repetition. I haven't challenged anything yet. Still, the system is already leaning toward me, waiting to see what I'll disturb simply by existing here for one day. I don't start the day with an announcement. That alone feels disobedient. As President of France, silence is usually strategic, carefully timed, professionally empty. I keep it that way, but for the wrong reasons. I want to see how long the machine runs without my cues. The first choice is administrative and deliberately unglamorous. I ask for unfiltered briefing notes on the pension reform protests. No summaries, no softened language, no recommendation slides. Just internal memos, raw police assessments, labor ministry warnings, budget constraints. This is material normally absorbed through layers of justification. I read it as text, not policy. Within minutes, aides start hovering. Someone asks if this is for a speech. I say no. That answer alone gets logged. I request a closed meeting with mid-level civil servants from the labor ministry. Not union leaders, not ministers. People who draft the numbers and never defend them on television. Cameras are excluded by default, but that exclusion itself triggers suspicion. I'm told the press will assume something secretive. I proceed anyway. I ask them where the reform breaks politically, not economically. They hesitate. I insist. Someone finally says the quiet part. The math works, but the timing doesn't, and timing has no column in spreadsheets. I thank them and dismiss them. By lunch, headlines speculate about a policy retreat. I haven't moved a comma. I step outside protocol again by walking into a grocery store near the Élysée without press coordination. It's a mundane errand, buying bread, nothing photogenic. Security stiffens, shoppers freeze, phones come out. I pay myself, which becomes a story about symbolism, even though I was just avoiding a handler. The act is dissected online as either staged humility or contemptuous theater. No one accepts that it might be neither. In the afternoon, I speak too plainly to a group of editors. No prepared remarks. I say that economic liberalization without perceived fairness breeds moral resentment faster than inflation breeds poverty. That sentence alone detonates. Commentators argue for hours about what I really meant. I meant exactly that. It doesn't matter. The sentence is treated as a confession, a pivot, or a threat, depending on who needs it to be one. I turn to foreign policy next, where the image is carefully cultivated. Europe first, strategically autonomous, balanced between global powers. I call for a briefing on ongoing diplomatic lines with the United States, Russia, and China. I don't change positions. I ask one question that's never public. Which stances exist because they are believed, and which exist because reversing them would look weak? The room goes quiet. Someone answers honestly. That answer will never leave the room, but the discomfort does. Later, a leak suggests I'm reconsidering alliances. I haven't reconsidered anything. I've only noticed the difference between conviction and inertia. As evening approaches, I authorize a small, technically simple decision. Reallocating a minor discretionary fund to cover transport costs for night shift hospital workers affected by inflation. No ceremony, no press. The amount is negligible by state standards. By nightfall, it's framed as a populist pivot or an admission of failure in cost of living policy. A practical fix becomes ideological evidence. The reactions accumulate faster than the actions. Institutions overreact preemptively. Advisors try to contain narratives I never released. Social media fills the gaps with intention I didn't supply. Every move is read backward through the existing image. Reformer, technocrat, divider. Nothing escapes that gravity. By the end of the day, I understand the real constraint of this office. It isn't law or opposition or protest. It's interpretation. Power doesn't let actions exist on their own. It forces them to perform meaning continuously, even when none was intended. I don't feel heroic. I feel exposed. The borrowed authority has bent reality around ordinary decisions until they no longer resemble themselves. I see clearly now how truth functions here, not as content, but as permission. The same sentence spoken elsewhere would pass unnoticed. Here, it becomes leverage, ammunition, or scandal. When the day ends, the title leaves me. The noise doesn't. And I'm left with an unsettling clarity. Tradition survives not because it's strong, but because power teaches everyone, including the person holding it, to behave as if it were. The last hours stretch in a strange way. The schedule thins out, but the pressure doesn't. If anything, it sharpens. There's less to do, yet more to carry. Every decision I didn't make today starts to loom larger than the ones I did. Power, I'm learning, has a residue. It lingers even when action stops. I feel the cost of this role most clearly in what doesn't happen. No unguarded moments, no accidental conversations. Even fatigue is monitored. Someone notices when I pause too long before answering. Someone else interprets silence as strategy. This is what leadership looks like here. Constant interpretation layered on top of constant restraint. I think about how this presidency has been lived. Years of reform pursued through resistance, authority exercised amid permanent protest, legitimacy questioned even after re-election. Breaking the old left-right order didn't remove conflict, it reorganized it. Every reform sharpened the sense that someone, somewhere, was being governed against their will. I can feel that tension in the air even now, when the building is quieter. The isolation is subtle. I'm surrounded by people, but none of them are here by accident. Every interaction exists because of the office. That's the real luxury of power. Not freedom, but filtration. Nothing reaches me unless it's allowed to, and nothing leaves me without being reshaped. As night approaches, the influence starts to thin. Not officially, formally I still hold everything, but psychologically. I know the clock is running out. Tomorrow my words will lose their unnatural gravity. Access will close without explanation. Rules that bent today will snap back into place. The system is already preparing for my absence. Power doesn't grieve its holders. There's a dark humor in how easy this was to borrow. One day of authority handed over without resistance. And yet, imagining living inside it permanently feels exhausting in a way no workload explains. It's not the volume of decisions. It's the obligation to perform certainty, even when doubt would be more honest. To defend coherence while navigating contradiction. To absorb anger without responding as a person. I understand now that fame doesn't remove problems. It replaces them. Ordinary worries are traded for surveillance. Privacy is exchanged for permanence. Every sentence becomes a commitment. Every gesture, a signal. Self-control stops being a virtue and becomes a survival skill. As midnight nears, I feel the influence slipping before the identity does. The title is already loosening its grip, even though I'm still wearing it. That gap between who I am and what I'm allowed to be finally closes when the day ends. I return to normal life without ceremony. No announcement, no applause, just the sudden absence of weight. And with it, a clarity that's difficult to shake. Power is uneven, conditional, and always on loan. It feels solid only to the people who don't have to live inside it. Disclaimer: this video is a fictional, satirical thought experiment. It does not depict or claim to represent the real thoughts, actions, intentions, decisions, or private life of Emmanuel Macron, or any individuals, institutions, or governments referenced implicitly or explicitly. The narrative is not a biography, report, or factual account. Its purpose is to explore themes of fame, power, influence, and public perception in a conceptual and symbolic way, using imagination and social commentary. Any resemblance to real events or statements is coincidental and interpretive, not literal or documentary.